What's up, my people? How are you? Just dandy? So, Ben's the only one that's good. But everyone else, you guys are dandy, happy, awesome. Hey, it's good to see you guys. You guys have a good Halloween week? How many of you guys had like a couple days off of school this week? Or early dismissals? I know that. I know that these weeks can just feel crazy and hectic. And I know that like we had a couple people in this room who were evacuated, and it's stressful. I know these weeks can just be a mess. It just can kind of feel eerie and gross because of the Santa Anas, the winds. Like no one likes the winds here, and but I'm glad that you guys are here because really what I believe is a lot of times when we feel like eerie and we feel gross, we feel like, ugh. How many of you guys felt that this week? Just like it just felt dark. It just felt weird. It just felt like, ugh. Like, yeah, you were out of school, and like, yeah, I'm out of school, but you also were like, ugh, and you just kind of feel stuffy. Yeah, so I'm happy that you're here because I truly believe that when we feel that way, we can go to Jesus about it. And so if you're new here and you're checking us out for the first time, like we talk about Jesus here. We believe in the work that he did to save us. And so we are called Christians, which basically means little Christs, little people who follow Jesus. And so we want to do that. That's what we're all about here. And so if you're new and you're checking us out, I'm Tyler. I oversee kind of middle school, high school. And so I'm usually the one up here. Sometimes we have some other guys, some awesome, cool people teaching. And so, yeah, we are actually finishing up our series on friendships. It's called our Real Friends series. And so if you don't remember what we've talked about, last week we talked about guarding your inner circle. And so we talked about the different size circles that we have. So we have this one right here. This is basically our outer circle. These are our acquaintances. This is like our teammates. This is our classmates, people that we're in class with. Like, yeah, we're friends. Like, we talk, but you don't really let them too close into your life. You just kind of keep everything pretty shallow. Then you kind of have your like good friends, and these are the people that you invite to your birthday party. These are the people that you just really let into your life a little bit, and you spend a lot of time with them. Maybe you have a friend circle. So these are kind of like your middle circle. As you see, you have your outer circle. This is like if you put like one little dot in the middle of this, it's further away, but then it gets closer in. But then you get over here into your inner circle, and that's your tight-knit people. Those are your best friends. Those are your like top 2 or 3 people that you let into your life, that you share what's going on in your life. And so last week we talked about, hey, you need to guard this. This needs to be people who love Jesus. But you also need to make sure that like when you're guarding it, you're letting the right people in and not the wrong people. And if you're letting the wrong people in, you might need to move them into one of these other circles. And you might have people who are over here, you're like, man, I really respect them, they're great, and you need to move them into your inner circle, and you need to try to focus on spending more time with them because you care about them, and you know that they're going to be a good influence on you, because last week we talked about how people who are close to you have influence on you. And so since we're wrapping up our friendship series today, we're going to be really talking about something that's very important. And we're going to talk about one of the most difficult things about being real friends, a real friendship. And what it is that we're going to talk about is when it comes to knowing when to change a friendship. When a friendship is going to change. How many of us have ever had friends and that friendship changed and you're no longer friends with that person anymore? Any of you guys have experienced that before? Yep, pretty much everyone has experienced that before. Sometimes change in a friendship can be better. You have good change. So you get closer, you spend more time together. You find out that you have more in common, so the change gets closer. It's good. Or maybe you go through something that's difficult and you go through a hard time together, and so you get closer together because it's difficult. Maybe you understand each other better because of it. That's a good change. But sometimes change in a friendship isn't for the better. It's not good change. Sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes we go through a really hard change in friendships. Sometimes friends part ways and friendships end. That's what your first fill in the blank. Sometimes friendships change, or friends part ways and friendships change, and friendships end. And there are a lot of different reasons why. Sometimes they're not a big deal. Like you changed schools, which made it more difficult for you to stay in touch. Maybe your schedules have changed at school, and so you no longer have lunch together, or you no longer have certain classes together. You just don't see each other as much. Maybe you've just both changed in different ways. You like different things, which means that you have less in common, so then your friendship just kind of changed because this person started liking sports and you started liking music, and you started just going in different directions. Changes like this can be difficult. But eventually, they get easier to cope with, and it makes sense because things start to change in their life. You start to just see that, like, man, I just miss that person. I haven't spent time with them, and it's really hard because I don't see them anymore. And then over time, it starts to fade. They start making friends over here. You start making friends over here, and then you're just like, okay, I'm okay with it. It's fine. I don't need that friendship because I have other friendships now. And a lot of times it's because you have a reason that you can explain to your mom. It's like, how come you don't talk or hang out with this person anymore? And you're like, well, we just kind of like parted ways because I don't have class with them anymore. I don't do lunch with them anymore. I just don't see them. So I lived next door to my best friend in elementary school. He was right across the street and then one house up. And I lived on a cool little cul-de-sac, and his name was Michael T. He was a Vietnamese kid, and we hung out every day, and we played sports together. He was like a super athletic dude, and we were inseparable. But when it hit middle school, he hit middle school. He was in 6th grade. I was in 5th grade, and things started to change after that because Michael started making friends in 6th grade. And there's two things that happened. He was going to a different school than me because we weren't like a K through 8th grade. We were K through 5, normal, and then 6, 7, and 8. And so he was at a different school than I was. And the second thing is he was getting other friends in his grade at his school, and I was still stuck with my people. And we went from next door neighbors and classmates, we would walk to school together, and to never seeing each other at all. We had no big drama or fight, just life. Life happened and things changed between us. And it makes sense, but sometimes reasons for friendships that change, they're not so cut and dry. So for example, maybe you and a friend had a difference of opinion about each other's behaviors or choices, and you butted heads. And that was hard. Neither one of you was willing to change, so what happened? The friendship changed instead. Maybe you had a friend hurt you with their words or actions, and it's something you just can't move on from. They said something so mean, and it just always sticks with you, and you just can't get to a point of just moving on and being close with them again. What happens then? The friendship changes. Maybe you had a friend who started walking a different path, one that you didn't think was good for them or for you, and they started walking and partying, and they started doing all these other things. You're like, no, I don't want to be part of that scene. And so that changed. That friendship had to change. Because you just felt like you couldn't be around them when they're making these decisions like this. So you have to make a change in the friendship until something else changes in their life. Friendship changes like these they're not easy to take. They're hard because our friendships matter to us. They have big influence on us. We've talked about this. And because in most cases, when things just aren't clicking the same way, what ends up happening is just the friendship ends, and no one likes when a friendship ends. Maybe you've experienced it. Maybe you've had to be the one who initiated the change in the friendship. Or on the other hand, maybe you haven't experienced this yet. A lot of especially guys don't really hold on to these as tight. And so a lot of when you're younger, 6th grade, 7th grade guys, they're like, oh yeah, I've had friendships change, but I've never had a hard breakup of a friendship. But some of you high school girls have all experienced this. Where you I had to split from someone because they were hard for me to deal with, or it was just an unhealthy friendship, and I had to get away from it. Wherever you find yourself right now, the reality is that many friendships only last for a season, and you will experience this sometime in your life. Having friendships end is a totally normal thing. A lot of us, friendships ending is like this is the end of the world. But I want you to know that friendships end, and that's okay. They don't have to end, but you're going to experience an end of a friendship. I have a bunch of guys from college that I was so close with. I let them into everything in my life, and the last time I talked to them was probably 3 years ago. I could call them up and say, hey, I'm going to come visit San Jose with you guys. Like, we'd love to grab coffee. And they'd be like, yeah, let's do it. But it's not something where we are continually investing into our friendship because it just doesn't make sense. We're in different areas, different times. We can't connect. Having a friendship end is totally a normal thing. And sometimes it's the best thing that we can do for ourselves and our relationships around us. Whether you've been friends with someone forever or just a short period of time, just know that the friendships have the potential to change. Change for the worse or change for the better. And it's important to learn how to actually deal with friendship changes in ways that's actually best for everyone. There are ways that friendships can break apart and both sides can be healthy. But how do we do that? So when we find ourselves in a moment where we know friendship needs to end, and even when we need to end it, how do we actually handle that well? And we're going to talk about that today. How do we handle an end of a friendship? Even though we have a tendency to think that the Bible a lot of times can be outdated and irrelevant to our lives, the truth is that it has a lot to offer us today. And that's what we're all about here. We're all about learning more from what the Bible says. In fact, it actually shows us an example of a friendship ending, but it ends well. And it can give us some insight on how we can end friendships well in our lives. And it's important for us to remember that even though the Bible is thousands of years old, it's still full of many accounts of people, real people living real lives. And so we can understand from their example of what happened in their lives and say, okay, this can happen in our lives as well. Because they wrestled with the same things as you and me. So the Bible can teach us a lot about, a lot more than what we can actually fully expect. Whether you're familiar with the Bible or not, or whether you call yourself a Christian or not, there's something all of us can learn from the story that we're going to look at today. So first, I want to give you a little bit of a background of the story that we're going to talk about today. This account, or this story that we're going to read, is actually in the book of Acts, which is actually part 2 of the Gospels. There's the book of Luke, which is the story of Jesus, and then there's that's part 1, and then there's part 2, which is the story of what happened after Jesus ascended into heaven, after his resurrection, after his ascension. And the Gospels tell us a story of Jesus on earth, and Acts tells us a story of what happens afterwards. So Acts is like the what now part of the Bible. Like, now that Jesus is gone, what now? And the disciples are left wondering what to do with the message of Jesus and how to share the message of Jesus to the rest of the world. So in this passage, we have 3 guys. We have Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament. We have Barnabas, who's the son of encouragement. And we have this guy named John Mark, okay? And Paul, he's known as one of the greatest messengers, one of the greatest missionaries to have ever lived. He loved Jesus. He was a follower of Jesus. He ended up writing more than half the books of the New Testament. His pal Barnabas, he was a huge encouragement to those around. And that's why he was given the name Barnabas. The name Barnabas means son of encouragement, okay? And so you have these 2 guys here. Barnabas was also a huge financial contributor to the church, and he was helping them get things done. And then you have this guy, John Mark. He's a little bit younger, and he is he's made some poor choices in the past, but he's the cousin of Barnabas. So you have Paul, you have Barnabas, and you have John Mark, who's the covenant or the cousin of Barnabas, and he's the eventual writer of the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament. So basically, this is a powerhouse group. These are all very powerful men who love Jesus. But things weren't always easy for these friends. So let's take a look at this. Acts, it's going to be on the screen right up here. Acts 15, 36 through 38. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, John Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. So what's happening here? Barnabas wanted to take his cousin, and Paul's like, that guy made some mistakes. I don't trust him anymore. I don't want to take him anymore. Let's not take him. And Barnabas is like, no, that's my cousin. Paul and Barnabas, they were friends. They were doing some important work together. They were revealing Jesus to people and establishing churches all along the way. They were planting churches all over the world. But when they decided to check on some of those churches, there's some problems that started. Barnabas wanted to bring John Mark, who apparently ditched them in their last time that they went out together on this trip. And because of that, Paul isn't sure about bringing John Mark, and he didn't like being stood up before. So why would he bring him along? Because what if that happened again? What if he got stood up again? So then Acts 15, this is verse 39 through 41. This is what happens, okay? They had such a sharp disagreement that this is Paul and Barnabas, they parted company. They separated. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commanded by the believers to the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. That escalated quickly. They had such a sharp disagreement that they broke up. This is a disagreement between friends. Paul and Barnabas had such a big fight that they decided to just separate their ways. This is a disagreement big enough that they decided separating was the best thing to do. This is just a disagreement between friends. And it sounds very harsh, doesn't it? Like, what? You couldn't just find something in the middle and just make it work? No, they separated because we just can't make it work. We can't make this happen. We disagree too much. To get upset with your friend that you think there's no way to solve the problem other than to just separate your friendships. It may seem like an overreaction to you, but it wasn't to the people who were involved. It wasn't an overreaction to them. They just knew, you know what, we just need to separate. This is not going to work. What I love most about this example is that it doesn't just end here. It's not just okay, they separate and then we're done. We're just going to stop everything. The writer of Acts, who's Luke, who writes it, he goes on to say that the two men, Paul and Barnabas, they kept going in the important work that they were doing. They kept telling others about Jesus. Their calling wasn't done. They weren't just finished. Even though they weren't together anymore, they knew that they could continue going and running and teaching other people about Jesus. They couldn't let this the change of their friendship stop them from their calling. They couldn't let it impact the work that they felt called to. They could have stopped talking about Jesus and start trash talking the other person and say, "Do you know what this guy did? He was so mean to my cousin, and I don't like that. He's so mean, and he broke up our friendship just because of a guy that I'm related to." He didn't trash talk. They just knew exactly what their calling was. Both Paul and Barnabas continued their work of spreading the message of Jesus with their new people, leading and doubling their efforts. So what ended up happening was that it wasn't just a group of two guys going and hopping from church to church to church. They've doubled now. They separated their ways. One guy was going church over in one area, and one guy went to another area and went from church to church to church to church to encourage. More was happening. Their friendship change ended, but it didn't let the end of the mission, or the end of the mission didn't happen there. They went through. You can be friendly without being friends. You can be friendly without being friends. It's not one of those things where, okay, a friendship ends, I'm just going to trash talk them, and I'm going to talk bad about them, and how dare they? No. You can still be friendly and still talk lovingly about them, even though your friendship separated. You can experience a change in your friendship and still have a positive attitude about the other person. You can, like Paul and Barnabas, have a friendship-ending disagreement while still going on with your life in a way that doesn't impact you or the other person for the worse. A lot of times, we break off a friendship and we take steps backwards. We get all mopey, we get all like, why is this happening? You get frustrated with God. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. We don't have to separate and it be for the worse. If you're faced with the end of a friendship, you have the choice to be friendly even if you aren't friends. You can still speak highly about them. You can still treat them well when you're in the same place. How many of you guys have ever ended a friendship, but your French group is still like meeting for lunch, and you're like, okay, I'm still going to see them. You can still be friendly to them. You can speak well of them when their name comes up. You can move forward with your life just like they can move forward with their life. A lot of times we break up a friendship and we're like, I just want them to like not even be able to move forward. I want the worst for them. But you can still be friendly and you can still move forward with your life and hope that they move forward well as well. The story of your friendship may end, but neither of your stories has to end. Here's the deal. You can move on with integrity. With integrity. What is integrity? It just means that you have good character. You make the right choices. And that's what Paul and Barnabas showed us. They didn't just trash talk each other. They just had a sharp disagreement and said, you know what, we're going to separate ways. And they continued with their mission. The same mission that they had. Being friendly without being friends, it sounds easy, but it's actually a lot harder to actually do. It takes intentionality. So when a friendship ends, for whatever reason, it's easy to write the other person off and just completely block them out. Or to even go back and rewrite your history with saying things like, oh yeah, we were never really that close. Because that's what a lot of people say. When you break off a friendship, you want to just think of the immediate and what just happened and forget about all the stuff that happened beforehand. And then you just start saying, oh yeah, we were never really that close. Or it's not that big of a deal. They didn't really play that big of an impact in my life. Or you can say, oh, I just always knew that friendship wouldn't last. They just weren't a really good person. But a friendship a friendship that doesn't have a future doesn't discount what it was in the past. Does that make sense? A future or a friendship that doesn't have a future, hey, I'm not going to move forward with this friendship, doesn't discount what happened in the past. I have a lot of mentoring friendships. And there was a season in my life where I had these guys speaking in my life. One of the guys I met with for 3 years every Friday morning for coffee. And we just always met up at 8 o'clock every Friday morning. It was our time. We talked, we caught up, and it made a huge impact in my life. I don't talk with him anymore because I moved down here. Life changed. He ended up having 2 more kids. Life was just crazy. And so we don't really have a future. That doesn't discount the impact that he made in my past. That was hugely important for me. But I'm not continuing to call him. I don't, when I go out in his area, I don't contact him first. But that's okay. And we're okay with that. Just because there's not a future friendship between that person and you, it doesn't mean that the person is a bad person or that they've always been a bad person. Friendships are complex. It means that the reasons for them ending can be complicated. It could just be one sharp disagreement, just like Paul and Barnabas. Don't oversimplify it by making you the good guy and them the bad guy. How many times have you ever broken up a friendship and you try to talk yourself up and why you made the choice, and they're the bad person, and they're over here doing the exact same thing, telling their side of the story. And so many times what we're trying to do is make ourselves look better and them look bad. So then everyone looks at us as oh, you're the hero. You're the one who's making the right choice. But so many times we don't do that. Maybe this could also be within a relationship as well. You have a breakup, you experience this breakup, and you're just like, oh, this is so hard. But then you're like, oh, they were just so bad. They were a terrible boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. No. You just keep talking positively about them because they did play a good impact in your life. Be kind, be loving with your words. Show respect and kindness to the friend you're parting ways with by being kind even as you part ways. So here's how. Here's a couple, I don't know if these are fill in the blanks, but you can write them down if you want. So number one, the first thing is choose what you think about the other person. Choose what you think. So many times we allow ourselves to think negatively about the other person, but we can control what our minds think about the person. We talked about loving God with your mind, and we have to speak the truth, and we have to think the truth. And so the way that we think about people affects the way that we treat them. So if we think positively about them, we're going to treat them positively and respectfully. When friendships are changing or they're ending, it's easy to think that the other person is the villain of the story. And sometimes we tend to assume the worst about people when our relationships with them change. But instead, you can choose to respect them with your thoughts. You can choose to assume the best. A lot of times, we're in a culture that always assumes the worst. Everything's always bad. We assume that they said something, this meant it was about me. We assume the worst. People even say that to me as well, like when I'm preaching, like, oh, you're preaching right at me. You're just trying to, I'm like, no, we always assume the worst. But instead, you can choose to respect them with your thoughts. You can assume the best. And maybe the person isn't out to get you. Maybe they just need a change. Maybe they're doing what they thought was best, even if you don't understand it. Or maybe just because you knew the friendship needed to end, it doesn't mean that the other person is a bad person. It just means that, you know what, we're not supposed to be close right now. Whatever the case may be, choose to change the way you think about the other person. You have to think about them properly. That will go a long way in impacting the way that you actually treat them. So the second thing is to choose what you do. So choose the way you think, and then choose the way you act. Paul said it's not good enough just to think what's right, but that we also have to do what is right. So choose to actually do what's right by the other person. Honor them with your words. Choose to speak well of them, whether they're in the room or they're not in the room. Choose to show them kindness and respect when you see them. Even when you walk by and you know your friendship has ended, you can just still say, hey, how's it going? See you later, as you're passing in the hallways. Choose to be the one to take the high road even when it's difficult. Even if they're talking trash about you, don't let yourself talk trash about them. You don't need to get even. And so as I wrap up this series, I want to encourage you to really be thinking about your friendships. Be thinking about how maybe you need to go back and apologize to someone that you've ended a friendship. Maybe you have some people who are in your inner circle that you just say, you know what, they're not good influences, and I really need to change, and I've known that the friendship needs to change, and I need to move them more to my outer circle. But I'm afraid to do that because I'm afraid of what they're going to say about me. Or I'm afraid that it's just going to blow up into a huge fight. Well, there is healthy ways that you can make changes to that friendship. You can move them from the inner circle and change the friendship to the outer circle and still be respectful of them. Because friendships, they have the potential to influence the direction of your life. And if you have bad friends who are going off and doing dumb things, you're more likely to start doing the dumb things with them. So it doesn't make sense to choose your friends. Or doesn't it make sense to choose your friends with purpose? It's important to. Be purposeful about who you choose. Think what it means to be a real friend to others, and think what it means to have real friends who really actually build you up. It may not be easy, but I promise that the more steps you take towards becoming and surrounding yourselves with real friends And not just people who are just there and, oh yeah, they make me laugh, so I want to be friends with them. But no, real friends who actually care about you, who build you up, who are actually going to point you in the right direction. Surround yourself with that. Then the better your friendships will be in the long run. So let me pray, and then we'll finish up with one more song. So Father God, I just thank you so much for this morning. I just pray that we can just have just a great week, a week that is honoring to you, a week that we can relook at our friendships. We can look at all the things that might need to change in friendships. So God, I just pray that you open doors or you close doors. I pray that if we know people who are on our outer circle that we want in our inner circle, I pray that we approach them and we talk to them about it. I pray that those who are on our inner circle that are negative and unhealthy, that we can make healthy changes and move forward without them in our lives, God. And I just pray that we can be respectful of people even when friendships end. So God, we give you the glory and we give you the honor. It's all about you, Jesus, and we want to make sure that we are focused on you and following after you even when things are hard. So we just thank you for this week, and we pray this in your name. Amen.